The House of Representatives passed the Antisemitism Awareness Act last night, and I have several concerns. If I were in the House, I would have voted no against the legislation, and I want to explain why. I would have been in the minority, like 24 Republicans. More Democrats voted against it than Republicans. Yet the media spin is that the Democrats are the ones who had to carry the water and get it passed. In fact, what's her name? Congresswoman Jay Paul, the leader of the progressives in the House, was furious that the Democrats helped Mike Johnson get this passed.
Tied to the fact that the Speaker finally, after 5 months, brought that bill to the floor and allowed us to have a vote on it. But I will say that Leader Jeffries has been clear, and I've been clear to him, and many of our members have been clear to him, that we are not going to consistently save this Speaker who is anti-choice, anti-immigrant.
Okay, we can stop her. She voted against the Antisemitism Awareness Act as well. But I have several concerns, and I want to lay them out for you on both sides of this. One is the anti-Semitism on the right. I'm not going to pick on Marjorie Taylor Greene here, but she raised the issue originally and said on social media that she's against anti-Semitism, but she would oppose the legislation because, quote, the Antisemitism Awareness Act could convict Christians of anti-Semitism for believing the gospel says Jesus was handed over to Herod to be crucified by the Jews. That's not actually what it says. That's not actually what it says. And this has now been circulated by Charlie Kirk and now by Tucker Carlson, claiming that the legislation would ban the New Testament, that it would ban Christianity. These are anti-Semitic lies by people on the right. What they are mischaracterizing is the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance definition of anti-Semitism. The definition is this: anti-Semitism is a certain perception of Jews which may be expressed as hatred towards Jews. Rhetorical and physical manifestations of anti-Semitism are directed toward Jewish or non-Jewish individuals and or their property, toward Jewish community institutions and religious facilities. What the legislation did is it took the 2016 definition of anti-Semitism, because the definition has evolved over time. U.S. public policy binds itself to the 2016 definition of anti-Semitism by the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance. And those examples, and let me read you the example cited by Marjorie Taylor Greene, who misses a key point. And again, I want to really emphasize, because I know I criticize Marjorie Taylor Greene a lot. I don't think she is willful in this. I just think she misread it or misunderstood it and probably was advised poorly by people. But let me read you the example, the one she's citing, and this is from the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance. Using the symbols and images associated with classical anti-Semitism, for example, claims of Jews killing Jesus or blood libel, to characterize Israel or Israelis. In other words, it's not anti-Semitism to say the Jews crucified Christ. Now, you missed the larger picture that actually the world crucified Christ. If you actually are a Christian, it's not specifically about the Jews, it's about sinners in general, Gentiles and Jews. It was the Romans and the Jews in collaboration who did it. But that's not the point of the example. The point of the example is when you say the Jews killed Jesus, therefore Israel or Israelis are to blame, that's anti-Semitism. The state of Israel as it exists right now did not exist when Jesus was crucified. So to use what happened to Christ to blame Jews today or Israelis specifically is definitionally anti-Semitism. It's what the Nazis did. The Nazis, and I'm going to talk about this later. I mentioned in the last half hour of the show, I want to spend some time in my book because it's so relevant to these campus protests. But the Nazis twisted Christian theology as an excuse to purge the Jews. The fact of the matter is, if you actually read Scripture, yes, Pontius Pilate hands Jesus over to the Jews who say to crucify him. to the Romans, so the Romans crucified Christ on behalf of the Jews. And the moral of the story there is that all peoples, Gentile and Jew together, collaborated in killing the Messiah. That's the theology point. To see Tucker Carlson and Charlie Kirk and others come out and say this legislation would ban Christianity, would punish people for citing the New Testament, that's fear-mongering driven by anti-Semitism, and it's not true. I would just tell you, for those of you who are getting your back up wanting to defend Tucker, Tucker Carlson has not said jack about the campus protests against Jews and by the terrorist sympathizers of this country. He's only spoken up to denounce the Antisemitism Awareness Act. That's a big red flag in my mind. I'm not one of those people who says, well, so-and-so didn't speak about this. I don't really care. But when you don't speak about that and then you rush to denounce the Antisemitism Awareness Act, that's a big red flag about where your heart is. And you all know it's true, whether you want to admit it or not. Here's the criticism of the Antisemitism Awareness Act and why I would have voted against it. It has nothing to do with criminalizing Christianity or the New Testament or anything like that. Why do we want to give Joe Biden's Department of Education more power? So I'm still getting criticized by some of my friends on the right for a piece I wrote in National Review last week defending the free market. And their argument is that, well, the left's been using this power. We need to use the power too. We can't just not use it. No, that's not my argument. My argument is not to use the power. My argument is to kill the power. Throw the ring into the volcano. I mean, it's something that J.R.R. Tolkien got right is you grab the ring of power. You don't want to let it go. But how do you solve the problem of the power? You destroy it. You want to stop the left from coming after you. You destroy the power that gives them that ability. And that is you gut the Department of Education. You gut the federal government. You deny them the ability to do these things. You deny yourself the ability to do these things. You deny them the ability to do these things. And we don't have the power of the federal government to do this. You do not expand the Department of Education to examine anti-Semitism on campus. Because, you know, most of these campuses already have anti-Semitism committees run by a bunch of anti-Semites. It's like the Human Rights Committee of the United Nations is run by the biggest abusers of human rights in the world. You don't give more power to the Department of Education. On top of that, why did they even push this? This is the bad politics of it. Why did they push the Anti-Semitism Awareness Act? Because they thought it would put Democrats in an awkward position. They thought the Democrats would have qualms about it. What actually happened? A majority of Democrats wound up voting with the Republicans for it, begrudgingly, but they did. And the headline was, because 25 Republicans or so voted against it, Democrats save the Republicans' Anti-Semitism Awareness Act. The Democrats, by voting for it, literally undermined the entire rationale for advancing the legislation. It was bad politics. Side note, I don't think the government should do anything about what's happening on these college campuses. Just hear me out on this. The chickens are coming home to roost. Let them be filled up with it. And then the employers of America, seeing what's happening on these campuses, through the free market, can say, we're not hiring your students because we can't weed out the anti-Semites from the sane people, so we're just not hiring from your university. That's going to force a hell of a lot more change at these colleges and universities than a committee of the Department of Education given power to investigate anti-Semitism. Just wait until the Biden Justice Department turns its anti-Semitism committee on Christian universities. Just wait. Let the free market deal with this. At the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, someone set up a GoFundMe for the frat bros who decided to save the American flag. Bill Ackman, a liberal Bill Ackman, gave $10,000. They've raised over $200,000 to throw a rager for the frat boys at University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. I thought about giving some money. I probably should have, but they don't need it at this point. Someone wanted to set up a way to reward the fraternity brothers at UNC for saving the American flag. The Palestinian anti-Semitic protesters were trying to tear it down. The frat boys stood around the flag and held it up, kept it off the ground, raised it back up so that the anti-Semites couldn't tear it down. Bill Ackman contributed $10,000 to throw him a keg party. It should be one heck of a party to celebrate frat boys. The fraternities on college campuses of America tend to be one of the last places of like normalcy and Americanness. It's why the progressives want to stamp them out on campus. God bless the fraternities. But let the free market work. We don't need another committee in the Department of Education to investigate anti-Semitism. We see it. We know it's there. And we know these colleges and universities are failing. So let the parents decide we're not going to send our kids there. Let the donors decide I'm not going to donate anymore. Let the employers decide I'm not going to hire anymore. That's going to shape things and affect things way more than any sort of investigation from any sort of committee that grows the Department of Education and its bureaucracy. That's why I would vote against it. And also, as a practical matter, it's not going to pass the United States Senate. So you wanted to do a symbolic effort that's not going to become law. You wanted to make the Democrats look bad. And instead, what happened is the Democrats had to save the legislation, neutralizing the whole idea of the legislation to begin with. It was dumb politics. What is educational, however, and what I really do think you need to note is the anti-Semitism that's spilling out on the right as well. Candace Owens is defending Nazi Germany. Charlie Kirk is nursing his anti-white grievances, claiming the Jews are only just now finding out what it's like to be white. I assure you, if you read the Bible itself, you understand the Jews have very well long known persecution and oppression. Doesn't need to compare them to white people. Now he's out lying about the legislation. Tucker Carlson lying about the legislation. The anti-Semites in our midst are starting to come out, and it should bother all of you. Instead of trying to defend it, instead of rationalize, instead of saying, I like this person, surely not, just recognize what we're dealing with. Using symbols and images associated with classical anti-Semitism, like claiming the Jews killed Jesus, in order to characterize Israel or Israeli citizens, is anti-Semitism. Holding Jews collectively responsible for the actions of the state of Israel is anti-Semitism. Drawing comparisons of contemporary Israeli policy to that of the Nazis is anti-Semitism. Denying the Jewish people their right to self-determination, such as by claiming that the existence of a state of Israel is a racist endeavor, is anti-Semitism. Accusing the Jews of having invented or exaggerated the Holocaust is anti-Semitism. Accusing Jews as a people of being responsible for real or imagined wrongdoing committed by an individual Jewish person or group, or by non-Jews, is anti-Semitism. These are the examples of anti-Semitism from the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance. Shame on the people on the right for lying about and mischaracterizing those things. Shame on the people on the left for embracing anti-Semitism and marching in the streets against Jews and blocking Jews from college campuses. The far left and the far right are proving the horseshoe theory of politics to be right, and we should all be disturbed by it. But I voted against this piece of legislation because it's a bad idea to give the Department of Education more power, another committee, to fund more of it, to go after colleges. Frankly, we should allow these colleges to choke on their anti-Semitism and go out of business instead of trying to reform them. Let the free market work.